Do your anime drawings look like this? Or this? First of all, that couldn't possibly be me. Okay, fine, you got me. I'll admit it, anime is a lot harder than it seems, which is why I decided to challenge myself by doing more of it. And from barely knowing how to draw proper anime faces to being able to finish anime paintings like these by the end of the 30 days, here's everything I've learned, including how I went about studying the style, the key differences I've learned from those studies, along with some perspective shifting advice from my friend who specializes in anime art. So, really quickly, thanks to our sponsor today, XP Pen, who was kind enough to send me their 22-inch screen tablet. And today I'll be giving it a really honest review really quickly. And I'll also be giving this away along with a screenless tablet from them called the Deco LW at the end of the video. So definitely stick around to the end to figure out how you can possibly enter to win. I grew up mainly using Huion because it was a cheaper alternative, but I've had my fair share of experience using screen tablets, so I am quite curious to try XP Pen's tablet for the first time. And so, first impressions, as someone who started digital art with screen tablet, I can attest to the fact that size does matter. And so, first impressions, very spacious, it's got a big screen, nice sleek design, simple to set up. The monitor feels perfectly textured, so it doesn't feel too slippery like glass or too textured. The biggest plus for me is the anti-glare matte film, because the first tablet I've ever used had a highly reflective surface, which would make it incredibly hard to actually see the colors and values when there's external light sources shining on the tablet and bouncing into your eyes. So what I did was I would close the curtains to draw in the dark, which was not good for my eyes. Which is why any tablet that has this anti-glare matte film is usually a big plus for me, along with the 16,000 levels of pressure, which is double of your typical tablet, which in theory should really help in the accuracy of your brush settings, like line weight through pen pressure or pen tilt. All in all, it's a pretty solid tablet. I can feel the quality. So if you're in the market looking for a good quality screen tablet, definitely go check them out. So thanks again to XP Pen for the sponsor, and back to the video. As someone who grew up watching anime and still do to this day, I really enjoy the style because of how visually appealing yet simple it looks. And because I mainly started learning art through realism, I assumed that if I knew the rules to realism, stylized art like anime wouldn't be too hard considering it's simplified and exaggerated to reality. If I understood the rules, then how hard could bending them be, right? But upon remembering my many failed anime attempts in the past, I knew that I could be severely underestimating how much I actually needed to learn. This won't be easy. I mean, how does this structure work? Do anime faces have noses or snouts? How the fuck does this make any sense? I was on a quest to find the answers to these questions. My brain was too wired in one way of thinking, and I needed to open my mind. So here were the main points I wanted to tackle. Number 1, how does the anime facial structure work in different angles? Number 2, what are their proportions? And number 3, how do I go about painting them without giving them the uncanny valley effect? And like I mentioned in my previous video about art improvement, when you don't know how to do something, just do it rather than wasting your time on trying to plan everything out. Problems will come up either way, and just deal with them as you go. So to start, I immediately went on Pinterest and ArtStation to put together a reference board of the most appealing anime faces I could find, and the ones that I wanted to replicate. I also used some AI ref, and while I don't support AI stealing artwork to train their systems without having the rights, we might as well use what's already out there to our advantage as a learning tool. After all, it is trained off really good artists. Once I had my references, I started doing studies, aka the input. During these initial rounds of studies, my main focus was to better understand the structure of anime faces. So my first inclination was to trace over and map out the basic forms while noticing any particularities about the proportions. And after that, I tried to immediately implement what I learned about the forms and proportions by trying to redraw a realistic person based on a reference into an anime character. And I think this is an efficient study strategy especially because the reference does all the hard work for you. You don't need to figure out the expressions, angles, or the pose. All you need to do is to readjust the proportions and forms to match the anime style. So I did a couple reps of that while constantly comparing what I was drawing with other anime ref proportions, and after doing a couple more sets, I prepared myself to make an actual anime painting. At the time, Frieren was very popular, so I chose her. And long story short, it didn't go as planned. While at first glance, it actually looked okay, and admittedly I could have taken it to a finish if I worked on it long enough. But the longer I worked on it, the worse it got. It had exactly what I disliked about my previous paintings, which was the uncanny valley effect. And more importantly, I still didn't know how to paint anime noses. Since working more and more on it was making it feel, well, overworked, instead of pushing forward, I chose to cut my losses and went back to the drawing board to reevaluate, because there was something really important that I was missing. And so it was back to the drawing board. And in my time of need, my friend Kuno, with a millennia of anime drawing experience, who literally came straight out of the womb to draw anime, came in clutch with some advice that really changed my perspective on things. And while I don't have time to explain every single point he went over, here are my main takeaways. Besides some of the tips I learned about proportions, which I will get into later, the biggest thing is this. And what he means by facial feature placement is kind of a meme, is that the placement of the facial features on the face doesn't always structurally make sense. For example, look at these drawings. In some, the eyes are really close to the side of the face, and while anatomically it doesn't really make sense, the visual appeal or graphic read comes first before the structure, and the structure doesn't actually matter as much as people think when it comes to anime. It's once we have the visual appeal, then we can justify it with structure to make things look more sound. It's a simplified version of reality, so clarity, visual appeal, and simplicity is king. At its extremes, you can think of it almost like an emoji. Kuno also mentioned that anime expressions are heavily influenced by how the eyes sit on the head, and that anime faces can be so malleable because there is no one right way to place the eyes depending on the expression or style. This explains why some anime drawings have the eyes or mouth on the edge of the face and still get away with it. The key was to justify the graphical shapes afterwards with a little bit of structure to make it make sense. Sometimes the expressions can even break the conventional structure to emphasize the acting. And because I love to visualize concepts into systems, you can think of it as a spectrum. On one side, we have the 2D way of thinking, emphasis on visual appeal and shape language, and on the other, the 3D way of thinking emphasizes showing form and structure. I would even say that it's kind of similar to Notan versus Chiaroscuro, where one studies purely the graphical read through light and dark shapes, while the other studies how to show structure through the use of light and shadow. One is not necessarily harder than the other, just different modes of thinking. Now, equipped with this knowledge, the reason this had the uncanny valley effect was because I tried to justify a 2D style with a 3D way of thinking. Similar to why the reception of live-action Pokemon or Sonic wasn't well received, was because they were using 2D concepts as well and forcing them to be 3D. Not to say that it's completely impossible. There definitely are artists who have found a good in-between. But Kuno suggested that I should avoid shading the face for the most part, while the rest of the body could still be shaded. Now let's talk proportions. Generally speaking, anime figures have incredibly long legs, thin limbs, tiny rib cages whether it's male or female, and for female characters they usually have an hourglass figure, so wide hips and a tiny rib cage. Now for the head, the cranium is going to be enlarged along with their hair, so make sure you give it a lot of volume. Faces usually have big eyes with cat-like proportions between the eyes and the nose. And here's a more broad tip that kind of applies to just drawing faces in general. Where you place the ears in relation to the eyes tells the viewer at what angle the subject's head is tilted in, so make sure you're aware of that when you're drawing faces. So here are the main takeaways. Focus on visual appeal and then justify it with structure. Keep the face flat and don't try to paint too much to avoid the uncanny valley effect. And finally, the proportional adjustments we talked about.
Round 2. Fight!
Now, with all this newfound knowledge, I knew what I had to do. Stop thinking about things in terms of 3D structure and start thinking in terms of 2D shapes. So to kick this off, I immediately went to grab some references with exaggerated shapes, and I found that a lot of anime shots with extreme emotions would fit this category. I tried to be as loose as possible, so a lot of these drawings were either proportionally off or structurally flawed. But that was the goal. I had to discipline that need to make the structure make sense out of me. It was almost like I was a recovering League addict every time they heard this sound. It was like an itch that I needed to scratch every time I saw something that didn't make structural sense. Like why I overworked Frierin's face rather than leaving it 2D and flat. But the more consciously I overcame the urge, the easier it became. I was also trying to simultaneously implement the things I learned from the previous study. For example, exaggerating the flow of shapes, the size of the cranium, and adding different kinds of hairstyles with volume, and also making a mental note on any facial proportions or placement of facial features that were really surprising to me. Part of it was like expanding my anime visual library on what's acceptable to exaggerate by taking mental notes on the small details. And another part was loosening up my eyes and my brain to stop thinking so structurally. And by the end of everything, with a few more study sessions over a period of a week, I felt like I was ready to attempt more anime pieces and apply everything I've studied. The solution seemed simple. I found the fix to the uncanny valley effect, solidified my understanding of how to exaggerate facial feature placement and proportions, and also expanded my anime visual library by just a little. And while I could have continued to study even further, like I mentioned in my previous video, it was really important that I balanced out my input, the studies I was doing, with my output, actually applying what I studied. It was a challenge that I was pretty confident that I could handle. And now for the last step. The final boss was the execution. So I chose the character Black Swan here after seeing a really cool cutscene along with her fighting this creature called Unto Death. And as always, gathering reference is the first step. This time, I separated my references into a few categories. The characters themselves to reference their design details, expressions, interesting pose angles I could explore, anime shape language that I found cool, and a ton of color/mood reference. I had been seeing a lot of art from Twitter lately that had a lot of experimental colors, and I really wanted to test the waters with that and see what I could make. This piece in particular was a huge inspiration for me. And so after gathering the references, I started sketching. And while for other finished pieces, I usually sketch a bunch of thumbnails before I choose the path I want to take, I decided to only go with the first idea because I wasn't trying to make this a portfolio piece or anything. It was just a fun experimental piece. I also made a 3D reference later to help me figure out the structure of the body and the pose. And to those who are curious how I did it, I made a really simple tutorial from start to finish on how I did this in this video at this time. Anyways, I not only wanted to practice anime, but also add other challenges outside of my comfort zone. For example, using very experimental colors like I mentioned earlier, by playing with saturation and different hues, adding two different characters with equally as strong visual weight and learning to balance the two focal points, and focusing on the flow of gesture to guide the viewer's eyes. And in the end, to wrap everything together, I cleaned up the line art by using Clip Studio for the first time because I was told that Clip Studio had a very nice stroke smoothing feature, helping your lines feel more clean and less bumpy. I didn't want to overwork it like the last time, and I felt like I've already practiced what I came to practice, and so I called it a day. And so I finished my first successful anime piece, and in the remaining time that I had of the 30 days, I was also able to complete 2 more anime pieces, and I kind of reverted back to my old ways with this one when all I had to do was not paint the face, but that's something I can always work on. While I definitely can't say that I've mastered the anime style and I still have a lot to learn, I was able to get a taste of what I could potentially be capable of, and that not only excited me, but also made me look forward to creating even more awesome pieces in the future. This learning experience over the period of 30 days was another piece of the puzzle to understanding visual appeal and another skill unlocked in my mental library to potentially use in the future for problem solving. I didn't really want to get into the specifics of the process, like how I went from grayscale to color, or for example, balancing foreground versus background elements, just because I wanted to keep this video short and to the point. But for those who are curious, I'll be posting my full speed paint process without commentary on my Gumroad for free. Another thing is that I feel like in the previous video, I was a little vague at times about the advice I gave in terms of art improvement, and so I hope that I was actually able to show you guys how I might put what I talked about into practice here. Wait, hold on, I lied. I realized after I recorded that actually Gumroad requires the price to be at least $1 if the file size is bigger than a certain size. So the speed paints will actually be up for $1, unfortunately. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video, or if you skipped here, that's fine too. Like I mentioned in the beginning, there is going to be a tablet giveaway. It's going to be this tablet along with the Deco LW, which is like a smaller screenless tablet that XP Pen was kind enough to offer to add to the giveaway. And because I already have a tablet that I've been using for quite some time now that I'm more used to, I thought I'd just give it away to someone else who might need it. And so to enter the challenge, all you need to do is to draw this character in any pose with any lighting that you choose. It's going to be a draw this in your style challenge. Use this hashtag and make sure you tag me in the post, and the deadline will be on August 31st. I'll be choosing my top 5 favorite pieces and I'll enter them into a random generator, like kind of a raffle, and 2 of those 5 people will either win the XP Pen 22 Plus or the Deco LW. But I'll also be posting any cool ones that I see on my story. I'll mostly be judging off of creativity, acting, and overall visual appeal like I talked about in this video. So definitely try to have fun with it. You can have her interacting with an animal or eating some food. Either way, good luck and have fun.